Hi everyone, my name is Devansh and I'm here to talk about inductive bias in machine learning algorithms. So before moving on to inductive bias, we first have to see what happens in machine learning algorithm. So we have um, independent variable and we have another dependent variable that depends upon that variable. But we have to define and we have to find out a model or a hypothesis that finds the relation between the two. Our job is to find the model itself. So if we talk about so inductive bias, inductive bias is also known as the learning bias of a learning algorithm. So, so it is the set of assumptions that the learner uses to predict the outputs of a given input that are not encountered. So we have in machine learning algorithms, we divide our data set into two parts, training and testing. So we train our model using the training set and we test our model using the testing data set. So let me give an example for inductive bias. So assume that we need to predict the price of a house. So we assume that the price of the house is dependent upon the size of the house. So if I use a simple model like linear regression, so I'll have a model such as y equals to mx plus c. So x is the size of the house and y is the price of the house. So my assumption is that, so my mere assumption of this model is the inductive if inductive bias of the model. So the linearity is the defining factor for this model. In fact, inductive bias is the intrinsic property of a particular model. So yes, and so inductive bias encourages the model to prioritize solutions with specific problem properties. So what does that mean is, so let me give an example. So when we are trying to learn y from x, and initially, so when we need to find a relation between y and x. So we'll have many hypotheses, right? We can have almost infinite number of hypotheses that defines a relation between x and y. So this is called the hypothesis space. So this is the set of all the functions for learning between from x to y. So to learn anything at all, we need to reduce the scope. So we have like infinite number of hypotheses. So we need to reduce this number so that any learning can be done. So this is done in the form of our beliefs or the assumptions about the hypothesis space. So the assumptions about the hypothesis space are used to reduce the number. And this is fact called the inductive bias. Through the introduction of these assumptions, so we constrain our hypothesis space and we get a better model out of it. So let us explore some examples for inductive bias. So I have an algorithm called decision tree. So this algorithm can best explain what is inductive bias. So what is a decision tree? So as you can see the diagram, you have a node and it has some branches that leads to another nodes. And we have similarly so it is like a real tree where we have um, branches that leads to another branches and branches leads to leaves. So instead of we call them nodes. So so decision tree is like a flow chart where each internal node denotes an attribute. So we have, so for example, a node represents an attribute and each branch represents an outcome of the test. And each leaf node, that is the child node, holds a class label. So this is essentially like um, as asking questions. So at a particular node, I ask a particular question, and it can have a yes no. So basically, we're dealing with yes no questions. So we'll have a yes or no question. If the answer is yes, then we move to another node, and if the answer is no, subsequently move to another node. So the decision tree is useful algorithm that is used for classification and regression. So, so the essence of this algorithm is about asking questions. How many questions do I need to ask to find any particular useful solution? So when we think about asking questions, now we also think about how many questions should I ask? How many layers should my decision tree have? How many nodes my decision branches and nodes my decision tree should have? So this question actually is an important question regarding the generalization of the models. For example, so now I have two cases. First is that I ask too many questions, means that I have many attributes to my decision tree. And second case is I ask very few questions. So what would happen? So when I ask too many questions, so I would be very specific to my training data. So it my if I ask too many questions, then my model would learn everything about the training data. And so the technical term for is called overfitting. So it would learn everything about the training data. But when I ask very few questions, so it would learn like very less. So it's called underfitting. So also when we so so it so when we talk about overfitting, it's like memorization. So our goal is to have a our goal is to have but generalization that is best for a model. So this generalization, so this asking of the questions, number of questions can be considered as the inductive bias for decision trees. Okay, so let's move to another algorithm called KNN, that is K nearest neighbors. So K in this, so this algorithm is also used for clustering and regression. So we have when so in this model we have, so as the name suggests, K nearest neighbor. So we're talking about nearest neighbors. So we have in the diagram you can see here we have a bunch of data points, and are we are trying to cluster them into groups. So our so we so in this model the main parameter is k. K is the number of neighbors we are associating a data set with. Now what should be the inductive bias for KNN? So KNN algorithm assumes that similar things exist in close proximity, and in other words, similar things are near to each other. So this assumption that similar things are near to each other is the inductive bias for this model. So essentially, inductive bias is the essence of a model. So now let's talk about hyperparameter. So so we have many parameters in our training data. So what is hyperparameter? So a hyperparameter is is the parameter whose value is used to control the learning process. So these parameters need to be initialized before training a model. But why are we talking about hyperparameters? All of a sudden we were talking about inductive bias. There should be a connection between the two. Like so, inductive, as I said before, inductive bias is the property of a model, and a hyperparameter is the most like most important parameter for the learning process of the model. But you see the parameters of the model are dependent upon the data set, but hyperparameters are not. So hyperparameters tries to capture the picture of the model before running the algorithm itself. If we initialize these values before starting the model, so it is a hyperparameter is chosen using the inductive bias of the model, and it tries to capture, so it captures the prior belief before data is observed. Like I said, it's so it as it is chosen with the help of inductive bias. So obviously it captures the prior belief. So if we initialize the hyperparameters and we start the learning process. So we when we want to get the best result, when we want to get the lowest error for for our algorithms, we change the hyperparameters so that we can like have the optimized value for our model. So let's talk about some examples of the hyperparameters. So for like like I said before, we get the hyperparameters from the inductive bias. So in the decision tree, the inductive bias was the branches for was the number of nodes. So similarly, so the for not sorry nodes, we have the decision tree. In the decision tree, we have the hyperparameters as number of branches, number of questions we ask. We can't ask too much questions. We can't ask too less questions. So it should be somewhere in middle so that we can get the perfect generalization. So and now in gradient descent. So gradient descent, we have to minimize the minimum mean squared errors. So the hyperparameter for gradient descent is the number of epochs. In fact, number of epochs is the hyperparameters for most machine learning algorithms, and also batch size is also an hyperparameter for gradient descent, because that the number of in how many turns are we updating the weights and biases for the gradient descent is also important. Now in KNN, so KNN it's now very obvious that the K is the so K is should be the hyperparameter, because the number, like I said, if you're close, this that implies that you are in a cluster, you are related. So K is should be the hyperparameter. And in neural network, the size, the number of layers, the number of perceptrons is the hyperparameter.
Hello, I am Suraj Kumar Patel and I am here to talk about types of machine. As my friend Devans already talked about models and inductive biases, I am here to talk about why some machine learnings are used and get used. So, what is machine learning? Machine learning is the ability of the machine to learn or make decision and autonomously without any effort from the human. How we do that? The machine learns from the data. It analyzes it, understands it by understanding the underlying patterns and nature of the data, and then by pattern matching and further analysis, it returns an outcome which can be classification or prediction. Now, there are three types of machine learning: supervised learning, unsupervised learning, reinforcement learning. Supervised learning, task driven. It generally does classification and regression. Unsupervised learning, data driven, does generally clustering. Reinforcement learning, it learns from mistakes, generally used to play games. Unsupervised learning, teach me what to learn, means we have to teach the machine what to learn from the data. Unsupervised the machine learning, we don't have to teach anything the machine how to learn it, find the pattern itself. Reinforcement learning, we don't need to teach anything to the machine. The machine teaches itself or learns from its mistake, as we can see. Now, supervised learning. So, what is supervised learning? It is similar to the learning under supervision of a teacher. Just like teacher gives an example, the students understand the example, make some rules, and use that rules to solve further examples. Now, here you can say an example of supervised learning. So, here is an input. It gives to the machine or model, we can say, and we have to tell in supervised learning what are these. Now it understands that these grapes look like this. Now when we see another picture of these things or another other pictures of grapes, orange, mangoes, it sees and find some patterns and then predicts that no, it's look like this, so it must be a grape. So this is an example of machine learning. So here you can say this is grapes. So data. So we are labeling these things. So data set in supervised machine learning must be labeled. An algorithm which uses supervised machine learning requires dataset which consists of examples of inputs and output pairs. They should be pairs. Input should be paired to an output label. Each pair consists of data samples used to make prediction and expected outcomes called labels. As training progresses, the algorithm identifies the relation between the given dataset or example and the label and makes some rules or makes a model that can predict an unlabeled data and what is the level of the unlabeled data. So supervised learning is generally used for two cases, classification and regression. Classification is simply to group the output inside a class or category. This is used to predict if person is ill or not, if a photo is of apple or grape, face recognition, etc. etc. Now regression. Regression is the prediction of continuous numerical values in data. For example, if you are predicting the pricing of anything, forecasting grocery products or anything related to price which has a continuous value, you can see it as a regression. So some supervised machine learning algorithms are regression, logistic regression, and some classification algorithms are decision trees and support vector machines. So first regression. What is regression? Regression is the techniques which predict single output value using trained data. So what is it's like it takes some data and it fits it and it tries to minimize the error of the outcome, and by doing again and again for multiple times, or we can say in terms of machine learning language, multiple epochs, it is able to reduce the error to minimum and predict the value. So what is the strength of the regression? Strength of regression are output always are probabilistic interpretation algorithm. So as the outcome are probabilistic, we can change the or modify the algorithm to avoid overfitting. We can do that always, just like by changing some parameters like learning rate, number of epochs, etc. etc. Now there are some weakness to the regression. That is logistic regression. We can see that's an example of regression may underperforms when there are multiple or non-linear decision boundaries. Regression needs continuous values and decision boundaries. If the decision boundaries are not according to the model you are using, then it's useless. So this method is not at all flexible. Just like logistic regression are used for some type of data and linear regression are used for some other type of data. You cannot do logistic regression in linear regression algorithm. So that's a very good problem for regression. Now, logistic regression. What is logistic regression? Logistic regression method used to estimate discrete values based on given a set of independent variables. It's like predicting zeros and ones. It helps you to predict probability of occurrence of event by fitting data to logistic function. So it predicts 0 and 1. If there are some data which are just zeros and ones, and if you feed that to machines like spam, let's say example, there are some emails which are spam, or there are some emails which are not spam. So if we feed the data to the machine, it will able to learn if the incoming email, the new email, is spam or not. The logistic regression is very important in predicting the mailing system in our modern world. Now, here goes classification. Just like regression predicts continuous values, classification is the ability to produce a class or assign a class to an output. So, what strength of classification are performs very well in practice because classification is just classifying. We do not need to formulate something. We just have to recognize the pattern and classify something. Weakness, constant individual strain are put to overfitting. Means normal trees are used to for classification, and trees are generally overfitting because the number of questions, as like told by my friend, the number of questions are vary from case to case. Means there may be an example where 3 question is overfitting or 100% is overfitting. You have to tell case to case for a tree. So there is a problem in case of trees. So classification, there is a problem there. So there are two algorithms which takes classification, which do classification for supervised machine learning. There are classification for unsupervised machine learning, but we will talk about it later. So decision tree. A decision tree is a flowchart-like structure in which each internal node represents a test or feature, just like whether a if we flip a coin, whether the coin is head or tail, just like that. And each leaf node represents a class level. It's like if we flip a coin 10 many times, and sometimes head will come, we get some money, and the money earned is the, we can say that the leaf node, and or we can say it's a label. This one takes after computing all the features, we can say in the terms of computer language, and it's talked about. It's talked by the ones in very detail, so I will not go in deep to that. Uh, what helps? What is the use of decision trees? Decision trees helps to estimate real values, cost of purchasing cars, number of calls, total monthly sales, etc., etc. Now there are other algorithms known as support vector machines. So what are support vector machines? So support vector machines, or SVM, uses a set of mathematical functions which are called kernel. The work of the kernel or the function of the kernel is to take the input and transform into a required form. So if we require something input data in another form, SVM is used to change that form. And different algorithm are use different types of kernel functions to modify themselves for the types of data we are using. Now, some applications of supervised learning. Spam classification, as I have told earlier, it uses to classify whether the mail is spam or not. In case of Gmail, Yahoo Mail, and any mail, we can use machine learning to classify some mail is spam or not. Face recognition. Face recognition is also a type of supervised machine learning. We have to tell, let's say it scans my face, so we have to tell that it's my face, Suraj Patel face. If it scans Devon's face, we have to tell it's Devon's face. If it scans your face, it has to tell it's you. So by showing many thousands and millions of pictures of people and naming them, or by labeling them, we can then show a random picture from the dataset, and tell the machine to find which face is this. This is used in many cyber crimes, SPI, etc., whichever use criminal activities like this. So, so there are some advantages and disadvantages of supervised machine learning. So supervised machine learning allows you to collect data and produce data outputs from previous experience, which is a very good advantage of supervised machine learning. Supervised machine learning can use both regression and classification, which is good. You can do regression, continuous prediction, or classification, that is classify something. It also helps to optimize performance criteria using experience, which you can use for that. Helps you to solve various types of real-world computational problems like predicting data and so much. There are some disadvantages also to supervised machine learning, like decision boundaries are some main things about machine learning and supervised machine learning, and it very much uses decision boundaries to separate the data, and the decision boundaries might be overtrained if training set does not have proper examples of some class. Now, good examples are also required for classification. If we have bad examples of classification, that is outliers, then there will be a problem. Classifying big data can also be a challenging because they are computationally expensive, and in general, supervised learning are computationally expensive because we have to train the whole thing with the label, and we have to make it multiple times. So that's all for supervised learning. Now let's go to unsupervised learning. Unsupervised learning uses machine learning algorithms to analyze and cluster unlabeled data. It's similar as classification, but clustering is something different. Clustering is giving them new labels of say cluster ID. Don't set labels here because there is no label in unsupervised learning. We say cluster ID. So this algorithm, in general, unsupervised learning algorithm finds patterns and uses these patterns to predict some cluster ID. As per se, we can see here, if we feed multiple images, it finds some patterns like there is a small uh, uh, semicircular ring here, there are color of the fruits and divide them. It does not know it is apple, it is pear or it is orange. It just know that these are different things by observing the in inert observing the inert by by observing the inert hidden patterns in these images. So data is not explicitly labeled in this case, and it is not required for any human to place labels on things. So unsupervised learning is more convenient than supervised learning in case of clustering. So model learns by finding here model learns by finding implicit patterns like density, structure, similar segments, or the other similar features, and uses them to give them cluster ID or uses them for clustering. So, unsupervised learning is mainly used for clustering, association, and dimensionality reduction. Clustering, I told you, it is the type of data mining technique for grouping unlabeled data based on their similar or differences. Association is another type of unsupervised learning method. Uses different rules to find relationship between variables in a given data set. And dimensionality reduction, like say we have a big data, we don't have the computational power, or sometimes don't need that much feature. So we generally does reduce the dimensionality of features. And to do these things, we need the unsupervised learning to do this. So dimensionality reduction is a learning technique used to reduce the number of data inputs to manageable size, which does not affect the integrity of the data. If the integrity of the data is affected, then it's no use to for dimensional reduction. So that's some use of unsupervised learning. So there are some examples or algorithms or of unsupervised learning. K means it's partitions all the observation into k data sets. K that comes from the k means such that each observation belongs to cluster with nearest mean. So that comes mean. So it's known as k-means. DB scan, it is a clustering method that groups the data based on their density, how far they are present, how near they are present. Based on these, DB scan cluster the data. Hierarchical clustering. In this form of clustering, a hierarchy of the cluster is built. It is also the similar kind of data, but different algorithms are used to for clustering. Anomaly detection or outlier detection, you can say. Anomaly detection is based on the uh, obviously it is based on the unlabeled data because we are using unsupervised learning. Under it is based on the main assumption that most of the data examples are normal and they are not outliers. So, like say there is a cluster in some place there, and there is some data points far from it. So we can know that that is outlier by just doing anomaly detection algorithms. So, and there is another algorithm known as Canon. Canon is not like K-means or DB-scan. It does not cluster the data as per se, but it assumes that similarity. It assumes the similarity between the new data. It always predicts the cluster of the new data. So it assumes that there is a similarity between the new data and available data, and put the new data in some cluster of available data. Okay, it's like assigning a cluster ID to a new member of the data. Now, so there are some examples or applications of unsupervised learning. Recommender system that means like just like recommender is like YouTube recommendation, you can say. So what it does, it based on our some views, first it checks what we are doing, and by doing that it finds similar groups of people who views something like that. And if someone, like say Devans and I are have similar watch history, then it and I have joined YouTube recently, so it places me in Devans and me in similar group, and whichever thing Devans have seen, it recommends me that thing, so that I can watch those things, or uh, it predicts that I have a similar taste to Devans as per se for videos. So that's a recommendation. That's a application of unsupervised learning. So buying habits, like when we are shopping from Flipkart or Amazon, you can see that when we are buying, there are similar things always clustered in the groups. Like you are buying from phone, the next ad or the next thing will be from cover or the screen protector or anything related to phone. That goes under buying habits. Grouping user logs, like it is used by companies, like uh, let's say there are thousands of customers and they report something about 5 or 6 features of the new update, and the company wants to know what are the major uh, things need to be changed. So it uses some unsupervised learning to cluster the data, and by based on the clustering data, it then predicts that which update to change first, so that the people or customers are happy and rectify the issue. So there are some disadvantages to unsupervised learning. Let's say it cannot get precise information regarding data sorting. Sometimes it is hard to predict the precise information because it is the data is unlabeled, less accurate due to the same reason, unlabeled data. The spectral classes does not always correspond to informational classes. It is like there are some mistakes sometimes the machine learning makes to differentiate between classes or some members of the classes, and it is a problem is unsupervised learning because there is no one to say the machine to what to expect or what to learn. The user need to spend time interpreting and label the classes, which allows that classification. So we have to verify, re-verify that if the classification is correct or not. And spectral properties of classes can also change over time. So you cannot have the same class as information while maybe from one image to another. So yes, these are some disadvantages of unsupervised learning. That's all for unsupervised learning. Now let's go to reinforcement learning. Reinforcement learning is simple. I learn from my mistakes. Uh, it's cover more of the dynamic environment thing, like the machine model interact with the environment and get a feedback from the environment, and based on the feedback, if it is negative or positive, it approaches another thing. Like here you can say there is a robot and these are the environment. It goes to the fire, the fire is hot, so it reduces some point. The machine reduces some point, so it interprets as the if the temperature increasing, it's not good for it, and next time it should not go for it, but go for it. So it observes, select action using policy, and based on do that action and get reward or penalty based on that, and object is policy to learn from it. So this type of machine learning generally uses reward feedback systems to learn the behavior or improve it. Just like examples from we can say The dog thing where you whistle the dog and the dogs come to eat, and this process continues. And whenever you whistle, the dogs always come. So some application of reinforcement learning are video games completion. We have already seen some like Mario or the dinosaur game in the browser. People used machine learning, reinforcement learning to complete these levels, and it's very useful. Industrial simulation. Uh, Not generally industrial machines we have to put the feedback and process to them so that they can do the work. But reinforcement machine learning also can be used to uh, increase the cost of the not increase the decrease the cost of the production, because then the machine can learn itself and we don't need any human intervention in the industry. And resource management, sometimes reinforcement learning is good for navigating complex environment, and it can be used to balance some certain requirements like what part to take to get maximum money or in business or anything you can say about puzzle solving, maze solving is also an application of reinforcement learning. Now, there is a question: why should we use reinforcement learning and why should not use reinforcement learning? So, reinforcement learning is helpful in finding situation needs and action. It helps us to discover action need the highest reward or longer period, as I have said. Learning is with the reward function. With the reward function, reinforcement learning is the best because the model always tries to reach the reward, and it also allows us to figure out the best method for obtaining large rewards. Both are the same thing, so no worry. Why not to use machine learning? Reinforcement learning is computationally heavy because you have to do the things again and again from learn. Or learning from the mistakes is a bad thing. Not a bad thing, but it's expensive in real life and in machine learning also. Parameters may affect the speed of learning. Obviously, if there are multiple of and the speed of learning is affected. Realistic environment has many constraints, many parameters, so that's a problem for machine learning. And too much reinforcement sometimes may lead to overload of the state. And that's all about types of machine learning. And thank you.